Hello everybody, Tyranno here, and today we are going to take a look at the Sky Guardians update, or more specifically, the Tanks of the Sky Guardians update. Feel free to pause the video at any point if you want to take a look at the stats. I will try and show the stats for each shell and for the overall vehicle as we're going along. But with that out of the way, let's get started with the first tank, which is the T1E1 American Heavy Tank, which is a 5.0 vehicle coming in just after the M6A1. Now, for those of you who watched my devblog video will probably know there was a bit of confusion around the armament of this. For some reason it was showing up as using the 75mm gun. It's actually using the same 76mm gun as the M6A1, which, to be fair, makes sense. I know there was some speculation it might be the 90mm gun, but I think that's been held back for a different purpose. And the main difference between this and the M6A1 is that the T1E1 has cast armor. So cast armor is a little less effective than rolled homogeneous armor, so this will be a little bit weaker on that front. But the main big change is with regards to the transmission. The engine is actually slightly worse, and this weighs slightly more than the M6A1, but it actually has a higher top speed, 23.1 miles per hour versus about 21 for the M6A1. And my M6A1 is fully spaded, so unspaded versus fully spaded. And you can also see, because it has an electric transmission, it has the same top speed forward as it has back. So this is very good for ambush situations or shoot and scoot situations. Just peek around the corner, fire a devastating barrage from your 76mm and potentially the 37mm, and then just whip back around the corner before the enemy can even react. So I think this will be a very effective tank. I'm not sure it was necessarily needed, but it had to be added in at some point, and so I am very glad it has been added. Now, the next tank is the SD-KFZ 222, which we'll be looking at twice in this video because, of course, China also got a variant. Now, this has moved because originally it was before the Flak Panzer 1, it's now after the Flak Panzer 38, and it is a 1.7 vehicle. And this is actually slightly more effective than the Chinese variant because it has the more effective KWK-38 cannon, which has a much faster fire rate, has a little bit more armour around this area. I believe on the Chinese variant it's just a flat 8mm. A little bit of a disadvantage is with regards to the ammo capacity. It only has a capacity for 10 rounds. So as you can see here, with the much faster fire rate, you can fire your entire ammo complement in about 2 seconds, and because you're firing a lot faster, you've got a lot less chance to actually react. I do wonder if that fire rate might be a bit of a disadvantage against further away aircraft, because of course you have fired your whole ammo complement and the enemy aircraft could change course, whereas with the Chinese variant, because it's slower firing, and you've got more ammo, you can actually react to those changes in path from the aircraft. But I think this will be a very useful vehicle, and of course it also comes with the excellent HFAP rounds, 31mm of penetration. Of course, the Chinese variant does not come with that, or at least it didn't in the devblog. So I think this will be more useful in the ground attack role, to be honest, even if the Chinese variant at least was billed as more of a self-propelled anti-aircraft vehicle. And the other German vehicle is the T-72M1. As far as I'm aware, this is basically the same as the Finnish variant. So you can see the armour and ammo penetrations. We'll show that on screen in a second, just to double check it all. As far as I'm aware, this is basically the same as the Finnish variant, so top speed of about 37 miles per hour, got 3 crew, and as far as I'm aware, it comes with the exact same ammo as the Finnish variant. Just showing them on screen now for you. And of course, does come with some smoke grenades and various machine guns. Moving on to the Russian tech tree, we'll start off with the Praga first. And as you can see here, it's a bog standard self-propelled anti-aircraft vehicle, very lightly armoured, about 10mm max armour, even when sloped, it's not particularly effective. 5 crew, 4 in this armoured cabin here, and 1 gunner at the back, very exposed. And it's got some very effective weapons. It's got the twin 30mm cannons. So these can fire your default rounds, which are the HFAP and Fragmentation Incendiary Tracer, or you can fire Incendiary Tracer on its own, or HFAP on its own. And as I mentioned in my video looking at this on the devblog, very effective HFAP rounds, 74mm of penetration, so you could penetrate quite a few vehicles, even in higher battle ratings, especially if you're shooting from the sides, which isn't a huge issue, but it's more of a problem when it's only 6.0. I feel like most of the vehicles that have got very high penetration against enemy vehicles tend to be in the higher tiers, where it's a less of an issue. So having a very fast firing vehicle with very good penetration at 6.0 could be a bit of an issue. And of course this is also a Czechoslovakian vehicle, forgot to mention that, which is a bit of a shame for it to be in the Soviet tech tree, but it does make the most sense, to be honest. Now, this last vehicle on the Soviet tech tree, the Pantsir S1, has caused a bit of a stir. Now, as many of you know, I don't particularly play the high tiers, so this isn't much of an issue for me. But you can see it's very lightly armoured, though it has high hardness rolled armour, which I believe has a 20% modifier, so that 6.6mm is actually more like 8mm, I believe. Equivalent protection seems to be about 8mm on the 6mm of armour. It's got armoured glass, which, you know, helps a little bit. And it's got a crew of 3, driver, commander and a gunner. And of course, the big thing that everyone is worried about is the missiles and radar. Again, I don't play the higher tiers, so this doesn't affect me particularly much, but from what I understand, this can lock onto 4 targets, and it has a range of about 18 kilometers. From what I understand, that is a lot more than other self-propelled anti-aircraft missile vehicles. So, if this is the only one that's got that range and the ability to target so many vehicles, yeah, that I can see why that is a bit of an issue. I don't know why Gaijin have done it like that. It wouldn't be a problem if the other nations had equivalents, but as far as I'm aware, they don't seem to have much in the way of equivalent vehicles. It does also come with 4 30mm cannons, which I kind of find a bit surprising. And they just fire your bog standard default shells, armor-piercing tracer, high explosive fragmentation, or you can fire them not quite individually. You could do a majority high explosive, but with a bit of armor-piercing tracer, or you could do mostly armor-piercing tracer, but with a little bit of high explosive. And of course, this is also quite a fast vehicle, 34 miles per hour. So yeah, I can see this being a bit of a pain for the higher tier aircraft and such, and hopefully they will add some equivalents for other nations. Now moving on to Britain, we got 2 tanks in this update, and the first one is the Churchill NA-75, which is a Churchill Mark IV which has a cast turret, and it has the mantlet and gun from a 75mm armed German. Now again, cast armour, so it's going to be a little less effective, and it also seems a little less thick. It's about 89mm on the Churchill Mark III, but here it seems to be mostly 70mm all round, even though the turret armour does say it should be 89mm, so I don't know if there's a issue there for some reason. But of course, the big thing that has been added is the 75mm gun, which gives you effective armour-piercing shells, but not as effective as the Churchill Mark III. But of course, also the shells with high explosive filler, which are a very welcome addition to the British tech tree. And of course, you've got your high explosive and smoke shells as well, though, of course, like I say, the big selling point is going to be that high explosive shell. And also I can confirm they have fixed the coaxial machine gun, because basically this was fixed in point. It does now actually move. Now, of course, in real life, it doesn't move as far as the actual turret itself, or the actual gun itself, sorry, because it's not actually fixed to the gun. But obviously, in the dev server, it was just fixed to 1 point, so you can actually use effective machine gun fire now. But apart from the turret and the gun, as far as I'm aware, the speed, weight and crew complement is exactly the same as the Churchill Mark III. And this is coming in at 4.3, so a little bit higher than the Churchill Mark III, despite having a ostensibly worse gun. So with the high explosive filler, it is just valued a lot higher than just having pure penetration. Now the next tank is the Challenger 2E, and this is now the very, very top tier of the British tank tech tree. And the main difference between this and the other tanks is it has a much higher speed. It has a better engine, so it's got 10 gears forward and 6 backwards for a top speed of 45 miles per hour forward, 21.3 miles backwards, and a diesel engine, 13,027 horsepower. Compare that to the Black Knight, 8 miles per hour faster, about 250 odd horsepower forward, although it also has quite a few gears forward and backwards, the Black Knight, 8 forward, 4 back. But it's actually got a slower reverse speed, the Challenger 2E, but much faster forward speed. As far as I'm aware, I know there was some issue with the engine deck. I'm not entirely sure if they fixed that. I never actually saw this in the dev server, and I'm not entirely sure what it looks like in real life, to be honest. I know there was some issue with the engine deck not being correct, But as far as I'm aware, the armour and everything else is broadly the same as the Black Knight. Yeah, so 270, 130 versus 270, 130. And they both weigh the same. They have the same crew complement. We just show off the gun just to show that it has the same ammunition. So you've got your HESH rounds, you've got APDS rounds, got quite a few APFSDS rounds even. Again, I don't play the high tier, so this isn't a big deal for me, but for those of you who play the high tiers of Britain, I presume this will be a very welcome addition for you. Now, for the Japanese, we only got the one vehicle, which was a pack vehicle, the Type 16 FPS, it's basically just a Type 16 armoured car, and it has broadly the same ammunition as the others. It doesn't come with the very advanced round used by the top tier Type 16, if I remember correctly, Type 93, which has 396mm penetration at 500 metres. The best of the pack vehicle is 342. So about 50mm less penetration with its best round versus the Type 16. As far as I'm aware, it seems to be broadly the same as the other Type 16s. It has broadly the same armour. It has this camo netting, which I don't think really makes much of a difference, to be honest, but I don't know, maybe in a few edge cases. Got 4 crew, driver, gunner, commander, and the loader. Of course, the commander can take control of the gun if needed, and it has a top speed of 62 miles per hour, weighs 26 tons, 504 horsepower engine, and 5 gears forward, 2 gears back. And yeah, this is the same battle rating as the Type 16 prototype. So presumably it is broadly the same as that vehicle, very similar, weighs the same top speed, and the main gun and ammunition is the same. Now, moving on to China, and we've got a familiar vehicle, the SD-KFZ 222. But of course, like I say, it is different for the Chinese. For example, this is 8mm instead of 30mm. Has the KWK-30 gun, which has a slower rate of fire, 280 rounds a minute. It's also slower than the German variant, so this is definitely meant to be the worst variant. And of course, it doesn't come with the HVAP rounds, so you've only got a max penetration of 23mm. And you can also carry high explosive fragmentation incendiary shells as well. And this is the start of the Chinese self-propelled anti-aircraft lineup. Of course, it is the only Tier 1 Chinese SPAA vehicle. And I think it will be quite useful in that role. As I was saying in the German variant, I think the slower rate of fire and the addition of 20-round magazine instead of the 10 for the German can make it a little bit more effective for anti-aircraft work. I do think the slower rate of fire can work out in a way because you can react to enemies' force changes from their aircraft. And yeah, that was quite a shot there. That completely obliterated that. I didn't even get a single hit with the German variant because, like I say, you fire off your entire magazine in about 2 seconds. Whereas that, you can actually react to enemy course changes and react to where your shells are heading. So yeah, I think this will be a very effective self-propelled anti-aircraft gun. I think it's a very welcome addition to the Chinese tech tree. We've then got the ZTS-63, which is going to be between the ZBD-86 and the M48A1. Now, as you might expect, it is very lightly armoured, about max armour of 20mm around the turret, about 15mm for the hull. And it's got the 85mm gun, which is pretty effective. It's got 2 machine guns. We'll show off the ammunition, 300mm for the Type 1956 heat shell, got high explosive shell, and then you've got APC-BC shells, but they're only 154mm of armour penetration. But you do have the APFS-DS round, which gives you 217mm of penetration. Less than the heat shell, of course, but it may be useful for some long-range shots or against enemies that have protection against heat. And it has a decent top speed, 40 miles per hour forward, and it's not particularly great in the reverse, only 5 miles per hour. 354 horsepower engine, and it weighs about 18.4 tons, and it has a crew of 4, driver, gunner, commander, and the loader. So yeah, this is a pretty effective light tank, and it's coming in at battle rating 7.3, which means that, weirdly enough, the whole of the left side of the Chinese tech tree is 7.3 at rank 5. So these all seem to be rather similar to each other in capability from the looks of it. Maybe the ZTS-63 will perform better in actual game situations, so that may be changed. But for the moment, you haven't really got much to choose from between these three vehicles. You've got one medium tank and two light tanks that all seem to broadly perform pretty similarly, at least according to Gaijin's estimations. Moving on to Italy, and we have, of course, got the Ariete AMV, which is the very top tier Italian tank now. It's at battle rating 11.3, so higher than anything else. And it's got one machine gun and the 120mm cannon. So that fires heat shells, 480mm penetration, APFS DS, 557mm penetration at 500 metres, and another APFS DS, the DM53, which has 610mm of penetration. So this looks to be very effective. This is a very effective weapon. It's got a max armour of about 140mm on the turret, 110 for the hull, and of course it's got composite armour, which helps to improve against heat shells. And this armour here is actually high hardness, so that's 20mm more protection than regular RHA armour, which is good. Maybe not the most effective thing when you've only got 20mm of it, but of course you've got the composite armour behind it. And this has a very good top speed of 40 miles per hour, though this doesn't seem much different from the Arietes before it. Got 8 gears forward, 4 gears back, so 28.9 miles per hour backwards and 40 forward. Compare that to the regular Ariete. Yeah, so about broadly the same speed, though it is a more powerful engine, so it probably does accelerate a lot better. So this will probably be a lot more mobile compared to the previous Arietes. And it also has a crew of 4, gunner, commander, and a loader in the turret, and the driver in the hull. And the commander can also fire the main armament, which is pretty handy if your gunner gets knocked out. So I think this will be a very effective tank for the Italian top tiers. Now, of course, you do still have this weakness here with the ammo, only 50mm, and that's rolled homogeneous armour, not the high hardness, so it is just a straight 50mm plus whatever armour protection you get from sloping. So still very vulnerable, but a lot more mobile, so hopefully you can still use this very effectively in the top tiers. Now, moving on, we come to the very big Char 2C, which, of course, everyone's been looking forward to. Who couldn't look forward to the Char 2C? And, of course, not a premium vehicle. It is a regular vehicle between the B1 BIS and the M4A3 105. And it's coming in at 2.3, which I'm very glad about, because originally it was 2.7. To be honest, even 2.3 might be a little bit too high for it, because its gun is not necessarily the best. The high explosive shell has 11mm penetration, but the APHE shell only has 49mm at 500 metres. Now, as I forgot to mention in my video about it on the dev blog, it is a very effective shell if it penetrates. It's got 285 grams of TNT. As somebody pointed out in the comments of that video, the Tiger II only has about 108, and that's a tier 5 vehicle. And even higher vehicles like the M48A2 only have about 137 grams. So it's got a lot of explosive filler, so you will definitely kill whatever you penetrate, but as I like to point out, it doesn't really matter how much explosive filler you have if you can't penetrate anything. 49mm of penetration is not particularly great. I'll quickly just show off the gun quickly here. Just firing against the Panzer IV. And as you can see there, very low tier Panzer IV. Okay, we hit the gun barrel, but again, this is just not particularly effective. I feel like most other guns would have gone through that. Like you can see there, it is a definite one shot, one kill, but you've got to penetrate for that to actually, take effect. Fire against the Panzer IV over here. Yeah, so if it's just a bad angle, it's just not going to penetrate. They've also fixed the driver view, which is good, but the stroboscopic cupolas seem to be a bit weird. I'm not sure they ever spun that fast in the dev server. Maybe I'm misremembering, but they definitely looks a lot faster than it used to be. Maybe that's how it's supposed to be. Of course, it uses an optical illusion to allow the commander to see out of the cupola. That probably does make more sense. It probably was a little bit too slow on the dev server, but it did look like you could easily fire around through that if you knew what you were doing. Of course, armour is not particularly the best, especially at 2.3, though it will block some low caliber rounds. But the side armour especially, only 22mm, and the rear, again, only about 22, 15 here. It's not going to be the most effective thing for defending against enemy shells. But of course you do have a ridiculous crew of 12, so it's going to be very hard to knock this out in one shot. If you get a high explosive shell in here, and it explodes, Congratulations, you've killed like a third of the crew while everyone else at the front here is still alive. Get a shell in here. Congratulations, you've wiped out half the crew, but all the guys back here are still alive. And of course, this isn't the fastest vehicle in the world, 9.3 miles per hour, and it weighs 70 tons, which that's got to be one of the heaviest tanks in the regular tech tree now. That's definitely got to be, and hopefully we'll get the Normandy variant of this, which weighs even more and has like 90mm frontal armour. But for now, we've got the Char 2C regular, and I'm very glad it has been added to War Thunder. And moving on to the finished tech tree, we've only got the one vehicle, the IT-PSV-90, which is a new self-propelled anti-aircraft vehicle. So very lightly armoured, max armour of about 40mm, but it does have these very effective weapons on here. We've got two 35mm Oerlikon cannons, and we've also got the Marconi radar. And you've got very effective gunner optics, 3 to 10 times zoom, FOV of 25 and 7 degrees. And this can fire default rounds, which is APIT and High Explosive Incendiary Tracer, or you can fire majority High Explosive Incendiary Tracer, majority APIT shells, which it gives you 57mm penetration at 500 meters, or you can find the very effective DM23 APDS rounds, which will give you about 118mm penetration at 500 meters. So this will be a very effective anti-aircraft weapon. It also carries smoke grenades, and it's got a very quick top speed of 42 miles per hour, 8 gears forward, 4 gears back, 19.2 miles per hour backwards, and it's got a 1327 horsepower diesel engine. And it also has a crew of 3, a gunner, commander, and a driver. So this would be a very effective anti-aircraft weapon. It's in at 8.3 between the ZSU 57-2 and the Feek 40. Yeah, I think this is a very welcome addition to the finished tech tree, and I think it will be a very effective SPAA vehicle. Now lastly, we've got the Israeli tech tree, and they got one vehicle which was the Merkava Mark IV LIC. And there's not really much difference between this and the previous Merkava Mark IV. As far as I can tell, the only main difference I can see is the addition of mine protection. As far as I'm aware, it has the same ammunition as the previous one, so the 325 heat shell, the M339 high explosive timed fuse, and then the 322 APFS-DS and the 338 APS-DS. Yeah, it's the same battle rating as the previous Merkava Mark IV-B. Yeah, it has the same ammunition. Weighs the same, has the same crew complement, has the same top speed. I'm not entirely sure what difference there is, other than, like I say, the mine protection, which is basically useless, because as far as I'm aware, there are no mines in the game. So, yeah, another welcome Israeli top-tier vehicle, but not really much else to say about this, over the Merkava Mark IV. And of course, if you do take that mine protection, bear in mind, there are no mines in the game, you will be a slower vehicle. So, yeah, it's a tank. That's broadly what I can say about it, to be honest. Yeah, if you enjoy Israeli vehicles, this will be good. If you don't really care, not really much difference. So, we've got quite a few different vehicles that have been added in the Sky Guardians update, and this has been very good for the lower tier vehicles, like the T1E1, SD KFZ 222, Churchill NA75, the Char 2C, the Praga. I'm very glad that Gaijin has gone back and focused on some of these lower tiers as well. I think my favourite's probably going to be the Churchill NA75 or the T1E1 for actual practical gameplay purposes. For the actual most favourite vehicle, it's definitely got to be the Char 2C. I'm just so glad we finally got that in the regular tech tree. Even if it's not necessarily going to be the most effective vehicle, I'm just so glad we finally got it. Especially since, like I say, this wasn't a prototype, this was a main tank of the French army. They had double-digit numbers of these, so it's very good to see this finally being represented in War Thunder. Anyway, I'd like to hear in the comments what your favourite tanks are, and did I miss anything here? Do you disagree with any of the assessments I've made about these tanks? Like I say, I'd like to hear your comments below. Anyway, that's a video looking at the tanks of the Sky Guardians update. I've been Terreno, and I'll see you next time.